everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the Abington Public Library. I'm Deborah Grimmett, the library director. I had a choice of standing behind the podium, which I don't enjoy at all, so I'm sitting here with a table and a microphone. This evening's program is being recorded by Abington Cam, so you'll get a chance to watch it again on TV, so I'm hoping you're all excited by that. Before I welcome our guests, I just kind of wanted to do a couple of housekeeping things and just say a little bit about why we're here and how we got here. So first of all, if you have something with you that beeps, whistles, or maybe plays Springsteen's Born to Run, please silence it because your music taste may not be the same as everybody else's. And secondly, I am happy to welcome you to the library. If you're not a library regular, please come back. We're a pretty cool place with all kinds of cool things. Just a little bit about why we're here. A year ago, we applied for a federal Library Services and Technology Act grant administered by the state through the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners. Say that 3 times fast. So anyway, and we did receive the grant, and it's called Civic Hub. And the idea of the grant is to encourage civility in public discourse. During our strategic planning process in 2022, surveys and focus groups indicated that people see the library as a safe place to discuss ideas, and the idea that, you know, we want everybody to be civil. So to that end, we wrote a grant, and we've had a number of programs. Abington Reads this year, our townwide read, focused on the caning, which led up to discuss the civil unrest that led up to the Civil War. So that was an interesting way to look at unrest politically on the federal level through a historical lens, which is maybe a little bit less threatening than looking at contemporary issues. And we had a great program and had the author here for a keynote. We also have a banned book club. We have discussed several banned books and have 2 more meetings in May and June. So if you want to read a banned book and come and join us and talk about it, you're welcome to do that. There's a display on the way out the door that has banned books and things on it, so check some of those out. And then tonight's program, the idea for this program began when I was thinking about the grant, and I asked for support from Senator Keenan and Representative Sullivan-Almeida, and got wonderful letters of support for them. And I'm just going to quote because they said almost exactly the same thing, and I know they didn't talk about it. Senator Keenan said he was supporting the program because the library is encouraging people to discuss issues with sensitivity and to seek common ground by respecting the diversity of participants. Representative Sullivan-Almeida said the library is going to be conducting programs to encourage people to talk about issues kindly and to find common ground while respecting social and political differences. So to that end, one of our goals is to help people understand what exactly our state government does for us, and I figured there was no better way to do that than to go to the source. So I'm happy this evening to welcome Senator Keenan, and I am happy to welcome Catherine Mullen, who is Representative Sullivan-Almeida's aide. And Representative Sullivan-Almeida, as I understand it, was in a roll call vote doing her job at the State House at 10 minutes to 7 and is winging her way to Abington as we speak. So Catherine has graciously agreed to stand in until she arrives. So thank you very much on behalf of the Board of Library Trustees and the Abington folks who showed up tonight for joining us and for being willing to talk about what it is that you do. We tried to get really catchy and say to people, what do you do for them? So basically, I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about background and why you do what you do and how you do what you do and what you do together and how you deal with differences. So.
I'll let you start.
Oh, thanks. Well, thank you. It's great to be here. It's great to see everybody. So I guess the first part of it is why. I haven't quite figured that out yet. When I do, it'll probably be time to go. The why is, it's hard to describe as to why people do this type of work, because it's more difficult now in terms of public reaction than it has ever been. But you have these little moments when you help somebody, and I know this sounds somewhat canned a little bit, but when you help somebody, as much as they feel good that they've got the help, you feel good that you were able to help them. And that could be on something as small as helping somebody with an issue with the registry of motor vehicles, or somebody maybe having an issue relative to housing, and you're able to help them. And sometimes it really is just a matter of a couple phone calls to kind of move things, to bring some attention to the issue that may be concerning that person. And it feels good when you do that. And in my office, I have an incredible team that I work with, and they do a lot of that work. And to see their reaction when they have managed to help somebody, you realize government can do good things for people. And that's kind of, as I say, on some of the things that may not seem to be bigger things in the context of what we deal with in budget and legislation, but it's a pretty big thing in that person's life. And so being able to do that is really quite rewarding. And then there are the big issues that you get to work on, where when you're done, you get to take a step back and say, I think that was helpful. I know a lot of people say it about public service, is why you went into it. Well, because you like to make a difference. And on some things, when you actually do make a difference, it makes it all seem pretty worthwhile. And I can give you an example, and this, Alex is here. We're working on legislation now. The representative and I are working on legislation now. We're in what they call conference committee, where we're working out details between two bills, differences between two bills. A House version of a bill that deals with revenge porn and abusive control, and a Senate version of the same bill. There are some differences, and we're working those out in the conference committee, and I'm on that conference committee as a chair from the Senate side, and the representative is on the conference committee as the Republican representative on the House side. And so we were both excited when the bill passed our respective branches, when it passed the House branch and then the Senate branch. And we were excited because we knew it was addressing something that had to be addressed, that there was a lot of people out there who had gone through issues relative to abusive control or revenge pornography, had survived that, and had played a role in the legislation of both the House and Senate. And so to see it go through, you just felt like, okay, this is something that should have been done a long time ago, and we're getting it done now. And you get a sense of, okay, maybe we've made a difference with this. We're not quite there. We're hopeful that for the next 2 weeks we'll reconcile the differences and get it to the governor's desk. But you just feel like, okay, we're making a bit of a difference here. And that's why people go into this business, I believe. And not everybody. There's always a bunch of different reasons, but I think that's the main reasons. You think you can make a difference, and whether it's something with the registry of motor vehicles or housing or something like that, or on a bigger policy, whether it has to do with revenge porn, abuse control, or I've done a lot of work in the mental health and substance use area. That type of work, you just say, okay, we're making a difference. I turned 60 in January, and I know I'm not a big person who pauses for reflection and things like that, but I thought I've been in this business for a little while, and when I went in as a young person, I thought, how hard can it be to solve the housing problem? Well, when I got to the legislature, okay, we've got a serious opioid issue. How hard can we're going to solve that? And the MBTA is not running. Well, we'll fix that. I'm 60 years old, and I've come to the realization, for better or worse, that I'm not going to solve, and we're not going to solve the housing crisis right away. We're not going to make the T magically work. We're not going to get to the point where nobody dies of an opioid overdose. The numbers have turned, thankfully, in the last year. But all we can do is try to make things better and to try to make a difference. And that's what I know motivates me every day, and that's why I'm in the business.
Yeah, so to go off of, what the senator said, I think starting with as small as helping people with the R&V. I know you talked, that's a lot about what your office does. It's what I do. It's what I talk about with people, at least in the office of Alyson Sullivan-Almeida. We talk about people that come in that have housing insecurity, that have R&V issues, that have unemployment issues, and, helping them, just connecting them with somebody that picks up the phone and answers. I think in government is sometimes so relieving to people. And sometimes I think, it puts a connection to, you're getting that representative to constituent connection as well. And I think it matters to people. They want to know who is representing them. And I think that's, I love the job. I know Alyson loves the job because it helps people that we grew up with. I know she grew up in the town of Abington. I grew up in East Bridgewater, and it's like seeing people out there like, oh my God, thank you so much. Like, you helped my mother find housing. Like, I couldn't even figure it out. And I'm like, don't worry, I couldn't figure it out either, but we'll figure it out together. So I think it's like, it's those meaningful connections, at least, in our office, as well as, and I'll let Alyson touch on, the specific pieces of legislation that matter the most to her, and why she got into it. She's a survivor of domestic violence. And she does a lot of pieces of legislation to help survivors to, benefit them in the long run. And I think that's important to her. I know that's important to her. So there's a lot of reasons why. I think me and Alyson's align a lot, but Alyson's is, overall to make the world, I think, at least the town of Abington, a better place. I think that's why anybody gets into this job. But yeah, so
That's great, thank you. To riff off of the registry, because everyone loves the registry, something that you folks may not know, our state's senator and representative help institutions too, to help people. For example, we had an Abington resident about a year ago who needed to get an updated ID. He was elderly and he was unable to get hold of and make an appointment at the registry. The gentleman had walked from Abington to the Brockton registry 3 different times. I got one of Senator Keenan's aides in his office, and they gave me a super secret phone number, which is actually on the state website, on the registry website. I'm a librarian. I'm trained in research. I can do research. I couldn't find the phone number. I don't know how any resident could find the phone number. Mm-hmm. Senator Keenan's aide called the registry and got the number, got it back to me. And then Heidi Hernandez, who's also a librarian here, and I got in my car because the gentleman had left and was walking back to try again to make an appointment in person, only they kept turning him away. He was down at the end of the road. We stopped and then realized that we looked like we had probably committed a kidnapping because we yelled at him, got in the back of my car. I turned around, we came screaming back up here. We called from the reference desk and were able to get him an appointment. We found resources for somebody to drive him to the registry so he didn't have to walk a 4th time, and he did eventually get his ID. And the reason that he needed an ID was he had a bank account. He couldn't access it. He couldn't pay for things. He had an ATM card and he didn't know how to use it. Once he had the ID, he was able to go to the bank, access his money, pay some bills, and have someone help him, teach him how to use an ATM. We can't do that. We don't have an ATM and print money at the library, but we did get into the right direction, and we never would have been successful with that because we couldn't find the information. And I turned to Senator Keenan's office. It was a 50-50 as to who I called, and I wasn't playing favorites. It was just whichever number popped up first. So that's, I think that's something a lot of people don't think about is, and I know we're not the only town department that calls on you folks.
Yeah, no, I think that's so true. I think people, when they get to us, they're like, have been on the phone for, an hour or have been on the phone for 3 hours and then been hung up on by certain agencies. And I think they call us and they get frustrated and we're like, oh, I wish you had reached out to us sooner. I wish you had sent us an email or give us a call sooner because, we're lucky enough, I think, to have those phone numbers that you can't find that take forever to get a hold of. And then, unemployment especially, I don't know if your office feels the same, is a serious issue and at least getting somebody on the phone, like a real person. And so when we finally get them with somebody and they get back to them, we have a great team at unemployment that works with our offices and they get back to them within 24 hours. When a constituent always like, oh my God, I'm going to come to you from now on. I'm like, well, hopefully you don't have to come to us anymore. But it's definitely, one of those things I don't think people realize that, that's why we have things like this where we can say, hey, give us a call, send us an email, because we're more than happy to connect people. That's our job. So.
Ours as well. Sometimes we need a little help. So Can you talk a little bit about communication with each other between the House and the Senate, how that works? You mentioned conference committees, and also communication with constituents, just how you all communicate.
It depends on the situation. Alice and I run into each other at different events pretty frequently, whether it's in some sort of a scouting event or a town event, we run into each other, and that's probably the most effective means of communication. That's really where we kind of have gotten to know each other, is from doing those types of things. And then it's really just letting each other know what's going on. We might have an event coming up, like for instance tonight, where we're both scheduled to be here, and Alyson called and said, I'm going to be late, maybe not there at all, but the best I'll be able to do is be there late. And so we have that kind of communication where she called and said, hey, if I get there, it's going to be late. And I said, no problem, we'll figure it out. And she was something happened, so here we are. And so it's just kind of that, picking up the phone and communicating back and forth. On legislation, it happens a little less because it depends on the areas of interest. We have to have the same area of interest when it comes to the coercive control and the revenge porn bill. And so we're in regular conversation, and we will be in even more frequent conversation over the next week and a half. On other things, she's more active in a certain area than I may be, and I'm more active in a different area, in another area than she may be. And so that communication isn't as direct. When we're doing budgets, we kind of have a general sense of earmarks or local priorities that Alyson will address in the House budget and that we will address in the Senate budget. And over the course of the first couple of years, you're in communication on that, and now it's at the point where we kind of know where she's going to go with her amendments and where I'm going to go with my amendments, and that's just from kind of developing the relationship over time. So it can be a quick as a phone call. It can just be a sense of knowing each other well enough and how we operate that we then just do our things, and then on bills that we share a common interest, it's a pretty close working relationship.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Going off of communication, I think people, Senator Keenan's a Democrat, Alyson Sullivan, she's a Republican. People are like, oh, you guys get along? It's like, we have great working relationships with our offices. We might not agree fundamentally on certain types of politics, but that in regards to communication and getting things done, I mean, I don't hesitate to pick up the phone and call, their office. They don't hesitate to call us. They, Alyson and the senator, they talk, like you said, at various events. It doesn't, that doesn't really play a role in, especially when it comes to constituents. I mean, it's like they're both elected to represent you guys. That's their job. That's what they do. That's what they want to do. And at least they can agree that they're on the same page as that. And I know that, our senator, we have Senator Keenan, we have Senator Brady, used to have Senator Timilty, and we had that relationship with all of them, which is great. And I think, I can't speak for other districts what that's like, but at least in our district, we're happy to have that. And it really is an email, a text, a call, seeing each other in passing. It's as simple as that, just like anybody else's kind of communication, which is, I think, shocking to some people, but it's how it goes. Yeah,
maybe just following up a little bit on the partisan issue, Republican versus Democrat. We all know what goes on in Washington, the difficulties between Democrats and Republicans. And in Massachusetts, sometimes there's more tension between House and Senate,
yes,
almost than there is between Republicans and Democrats.
Yes.
In my district, I represent Rockland as well in Hanover, and David DeCosta is the state rep in those communities. And David and I have a great working relationship. Same thing, we see each other at all these different events. We'll eat together if we're at an event. So that Republican-Democratic tension isn't nearly what it is in Washington. And I would say on a personal level, there's no tension. Mm-hmm. It's just the respect that we may have different perspectives on issues. And if there's a tension at the State House, I believe it's between the House and the Senate. And that's just kind of inherent in some ways. The House has 160 members. The Senate has 40. And so the House has to run a little bit differently than the Senate. In general, the organization over there is a little bit more top-down than it might be in the Senate. Right now, we're going through a period in the Senate where the organization is a little bit top-down as well. But that's where it comes from. The Senate tends to be more progressive, more liberal, I would say, than the House, and so that's kind of the perspectives. And as a result, sometimes the House will have a priority and the Senate will know it, and this applies particularly during the budget sessions. The House will have a priority, the Senate will know it. So if the House says, oh, let's put $50 million in the budget for this priority, the Senate will say, we'll put zero. Because when we have a priority, we're going to fund it at 50, they're going to fund it at zero, so we'll negotiate that out. I personally think sometimes that gets carried away. They get carried away with that, and that's why we end up taking a while to get budgets done. But there is that kind of, well, they want it, so we're going to make them ask for it, rather than just come to agreement on it. That's a little bit frustrating, but in terms of the partisanship, we're very fortunate in the relationships between the House Republicans and Democrats and Senate Republicans and Democrats. And I can speak for the Senate. The Republican minority leader, I think we are, and the Republican senators, I think we're really fortunate to have them over in the Senate. I really believe that they bring value and add balance to what we do. Other Democratic senators may have a different opinion on that, but I think it's really helpful to have people with different perspectives, as long as there's that respect, personal respect, where you can disagree on an issue, and then the minute you've disagreed on the issue, you go over and say, hey, how's things going? What do you got planned for the weekend? Are you getting away at all? That's really, really the way it should be.
Thank you. Sounds like book club. One of my big things for book club, any book club, and I started doing children's book clubs better than 20 years ago, is when you're talking about a book in the library and you're in a book club, a book discussion group, it is absolutely okay to disagree with someone's opinion of the book. It's never okay to disagree with the person. That just makes people feel uncomfortable. It's okay to talk about what you think about the book, and if the other person's opinion doesn't jive with yours, great, go ahead and talk about it. But you have to be civil. You don't want to be mean or cranky or say something. You want to be able to leave the room at the end of the meeting and go to Ducks and have coffee if you want it. So that's on a very small scale. Just think book club. So what are some things that you've worked on in the last couple of years that are make you really happy? You've mentioned one, certainly. Anything else?
I'm gonna let you.
Okay.
I was gonna say just the legislature.
I guess it was 3 years ago now, we were able to pass in Massachusetts a flavored tobacco ban. To this date, we are still the only state in the country that have done it. Other counties have done it, municipalities have done it, but we are the only state in the country to pass a flavored tobacco ban. And what was the best part of all that was that the impetus for it and the momentum for it and the leadership on it came from a group of students at the Holbrook Middle High School. They have a civics club there, and it was under the direction of Mary Clower, who sadly has passed away at far too young of an age. But she had an after-school civics club that was as big as a football team. At times there were 50 to 60 students in the club. And the students saw what was happening in their school relative to vaping. And they were bothered enough by it that they decided to do something about it. And so they got active in the town of Holbrook, convincing the Board of Health and the Select Board to take action relative to the sale of flavored vape products in their community. And then they approached me with the idea that could we do something statewide? And so we filed legislation, and we pushed that legislation forward, really following the lead of the students. And they came to the State House to lobby. These are middle and high school students. They went office to office to talk to legislators about the legislation and to tell them why it was important to them and to their generation. They came in and they testified at hearings, which was just absolutely unbelievable. In one hearing, the hearing room might have been as big as this, or maybe a little bit bigger, absolutely packed, standing room only, with lobbyists and advocates, convenience store owners who didn't want to see the flavored tobacco ban go in place, lobbyists that had flown in from Washington, just people everywhere. And these kids walked through these crowds, and it was out in the hallway, it was packed. Representative, how are you? How was traffic?
Busted.
Joy.
My apologies.
And so these students literally walked through this crowd, walked into the hearing room and gave testimony. And then they walked out of the hearing room and had a press conference. And the press conference was picked up internationally.
Wow.
And the story goes that when they finished with their press conference, there were two lobbyists for the tobacco industry that were standing at the back of the crowd. And one turned to the other and said, "We never saw this coming." And the legislation passed. And as they say, it was the first state in the country to do that. Now we're seeing the federal government look at it, and there's politics at the federal level right now as to whether the FDA will do that. They've indicated that they will, but my guess is it's going to wait till after an election. But that was one of the most exciting and rewarding experiences. And to just see these young people do what they did, knowing that people always say, "Oh, this next generation, they don't know what they're doing, they don't seem interested, they're too involved on their phones, they don't get it." I will tell you, based on what I've seen with those kids and kids in all the schools in the district, we're in really good hands. They were incredible, absolutely incredible. And what they did has been impactful. We are now seeing tobacco usage rates drop. We're seeing vaping usage rates drop. Their work spurred attention in other states and in the industry. It really was an incredible experience.
Thank you. We're in the middle of why and welcome. By
Thank
the way.
you, thank you.
Thank you. You got here remarkably quickly.
Yeah, that's not bad.
I mentioned to the group.
Did you
that
speed?
No, never.
You were doing their work whilst and that was why you were late. Our question now is dealing with legislation or something you've worked on in the last 2 or 3 years that has made you happy, that you've felt good about. And then we'll go back and I'll give you the hard question as to why you do this. But let's start with the
Sure.
first.
The easy question,
Yeah.
the layup, which I always do not mind the layups. So I would say in the last several years, the very impactful legislation that I've been advocating for and around is survivors. I know the senator and myself are both passionate about coming up with legislation to protect survivors of violent crimes as well as victims of revenge porn. What we call revenge porn is one of the big issues that I've really tackled. Most of you, if not all of you, know I'm a survivor of domestic violence. I have a lifetime restraining order against my abuser. And so going into this position and running for office was a big step for me, especially because for so many years I hid my identity, I hid my location, I hid who I was and where I was because of my fear of my abuser. Stepping into this role, it really took my voice back and my power back. And I wanted to give that same power and respect to others across the Commonwealth that have been fallen victim to violent crimes or other crimes of that nature. So I worked with Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Polito on this issue for the last several years. And my hope is to one day really enforce some legislation around the protections of victims to make sure that we're giving the prosecutors and our law enforcement officers the tools that they need to really step up on protecting victims of domestic violence and other violent crimes. But I do love your story as well. I think that's very impactful. You know, hearing people come forward in front of, your committees, and judiciary is one of the committees I serve on. And a lot of times those committee hearings are very emotional. There's a lot of times you're having people that are sharing their real life stories. And typically it's very hard and traumatizing stories they're sharing with a bunch of strangers and a whole bunch of people in the room. And sometimes there's media in the room, and that's very intimidating. But listening to survivors, both at a round table with the governor and lieutenant governor, but also in judiciary hearings, and listening to their stories and hearing them take their power back is very powerful in our seat as well. I'll never forget a story of child marriage. And I was almost naive to the fact, thinking that child marriage wasn't a thing in Massachusetts. And then hearing these stories of these women that were pretty much trafficked by their parents to become a wife to someone they don't even know, typically an older man, and then being forced to have sexual intercourse with them as well as have children with them was something that I was so naive to. And so hearing those stories brought me to tears. And I believe the senator probably has had similar stories as well. And that really puts the drive in what we do, right? Protecting those that feel like they don't have a voice. So, yeah. I hope that answers your question.
That did. So I guess just to loop back, background and why be a state rep?
Oh, it's
Of
the
all
best.
the ways that you could make a difference in the world, why,
Yes.
why is this your choice?
And I don't know if Catherine answered it in her perspective, but it is one of the greatest jobs, and I don't really consider it a job. I feel like it's a lifestyle, right? Being able to help those that are in need, especially during the COVID pandemic and the amount of calls and emails and face-to-face interactions we had with constituents that were really struggling to get by or to figure out and navigate the new life through COVID was a big change. And probably for you, Senator, who's been in, your position a little bit longer than I have, it was a kind of drastic change for us in our role. We became more of liaisons and really facilitating those conversations between our constituents and different services throughout the state agencies. And that is the most rewarding feeling, being able to help someone, because most people don't reach out to their state reps or state senators. I think by the time they reach out to us, they're at their wits' end. They're at their, bottom of the barrel. How do I get out of this hole? And to be able to make a phone call, and Catherine's nodding in the back, to make that phone call and say, hey, we got a resolution for you. And the tears that we hear over the phone or the emails or the joy when they get to meet the voice over the phone, i.e. Catherine, and be like, thank you so much. You helped not just me, but my whole entire family. That's so rewarding. So that's, I think, the best part about this job. And then doing policy, of course, debating. I think I was born to debate, so that's always a good thing too.
Well, that kind of goes to Rema. Talk a little bit about that, debating and how you make things happen. How do you make stuff happen on Beacon Hill?
He's directed to me.
I haven't figured it out yet, so I'll just go.
I think we're still trying to figure that out, right?
Takes a long time.
I think it's definitely different depending on, which if you're in the House or if you're in the Senate. And it's interesting because obviously I know the House side and the Senator obviously has very expertise in the Senate side. But it's definitely a lot different than I expected. A lot of the debating happens behind the scenes, which I'm not a huge fan of. I'm about transparency, and I think we should be debating everything on the House floor. And you constituents should know exactly how we vote and when we vote. I think the Senate does a great job more so on that end as being more transparent on their votes and having a record of those votes. But it's interesting. I'll never forget my first time on the House floor and speaking out again on domestic violence and the opioid crisis, and having all 160 eyes on you, and plus more because there were people in the gallery and also staffers that were in the chamber. You could hear a pin drop, and that is intimidating your first time speaking. But it's also very driving to really make a difference and make sure that I am your voice. I'm getting up and I'm not just sitting by and voting and not really taking a stand on any issue. I think it's important that we have active conversations. But a lot of the conversations happen over the phone or, face to face when we meet each other in the halls, like, hey, have you seen this legislation? What are your thoughts? Do you think we can have any conversation around getting this to get to the floor, whether it be the House or the Senate? That's my perception of it.
Yeah, I agree. It comes down to oftentimes the personal interactions, the relationships that you have with your colleagues. Not only, when you're in actual debate, is it important to respect their positions, but beyond that, having those personal relationships. And I don't think, for instance, that that's happening in Washington, D.C. And I think that's where a lot of the breakdown is occurring down there. Here, we had an issue that was on the Senate floor, and Senator O'Connor, who's a senator just to the east of here, a Republican, great guy, loved working with him. And he had a position on an issue, and I had a different position on the issue. And we are really friendly, and so there's a couple tacks I could have taken. If I didn't know him and didn't respect him and didn't really like him, I could have gotten up and just blasted away and challenged him personally. How could you possibly file this? I don't even remember what it was. But the alternative approach was to go over and say, hey, Pat, I'm going to go on the issue pretty hard. And he goes, oh, that's great. I'll push right back. And that was kind of the conversation that we had. We gave each other a heads up, and we voiced our opinions on the issue. And then the minute the debate on the floor was over, we just walked over and shook hands and said, hey, nice job. And so building those personal relationships, and it occurs by just running into somebody in the hallway and chatting, sitting during a committee meeting, getting to know members that are on the committee, just chatting with them. I don't think there's any substitute for that. And I think that it helps overcome kind of the institutional challenges that you have in trying to get legislation to move forward. I always tell people, when you run for office, especially the first time, you're sure that there's a challenge. If it's an open seat or if you're challenging an incumbent, you're running against somebody. And so why are you running? You're running because you think you can do the job better than that other person. And so we have in the House 160 people, in the Senate 40 people who think that they can do the job better than somebody else. And I mean, that's really, you run for that, I want to do this. I want to get involved in government. It's a calling. And so, but in order to get the job, I have to run against somebody else and convince the public, the voters, that I can do it better than that person. And so you go into the legislature with the idea that, okay, I ran against somebody trying to convince people I could do it better. And so now you have, again, 200 people in the legislature who all come with that same frame of mind. And so working together, getting to know each other, you break that down from the idea that, I ran because I thought I could do it better, as opposed to now we're here, let's work together so that we can get things accomplished. So you have to have that change of mind, and that happens with the personal relationships, saying hello in the hallways, grabbing a bite to eat together, going, we have a thing in the Senate called Senate Tours, where we go to each other's districts and get to see colleagues in their home districts. And last week we were out in Western Mass, we were on a farm. And then we were in an abandoned factory that was being done over. And those were great. It's great to see the farm, great to see what they're doing at the factory. But the best part of that was that fellow senators were there, we were out of the State House, and we were just having fun together. And so that's, I think, really the key, is establishing those personal relationships.
Run that by the House side.
Yeah, getting beyond the competition and just like, okay, what can we do to get something done? And I know from working with the representative, it's not about who gets to claim credit, it's can we get something done?
Thank you both. Those were great answers. How do you build relationships locally with constituents and with town governments?
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, sure. Thank you. So it's about being out in your district, right? Being out in your community. The way I build it is by holding monthly office hours, whether it be myself, Catherine, or both of us at those office hours. It's important to have those face-to-face interactions. I try to attend a lot of the events in the community as long as I know about them. There's definitely been some events where I'm like, I wish I was able to go, but I didn't know about it, or find out about it last second and there's a conflict. But just trying to be out there and be visible to everybody that lives in the district, I think is very important. Getting to know your department heads and making sure you're building those relationships so that if something was to come up in the district, you're a phone call away instead of trying to jump through hoops and what have you to get in touch with people. So I think that's important. A lot of people in the community have my personal cell phone number, and they call me directly if there is an issue. They'll see me walking my dog, or now walking with my daughter and my dog, and they'll stop me and say, hey, can I get your ear real quick? I think that's important to really see the both of us out in the community, and that's how you build those relationships.
I agree. We do our office hours. We do them in each of the communities, kind of on a rotation. We'll do evening office hours at the library. Thank you. At the libraries, and we'll do them during the day. We'll do them senior centers. We'll do them at town hall. On occasion, we've done them at coffee shops. And I know, just looking around, there's some people who come in regularly to the office hours, and we have some really detailed conversations in some cases. And in other cases, it's just somebody coming in and saying, I need help with the registry, or I need this or that. And they come in and ask whether we can provide assistance, and they'll do that in person. But yet the office hours are really important, and we work on that. And then you mentioned too about with department heads. As a result of redistricting, Hanover was added to my district. So it was a new town in my district. And so it was kind of like a refresher in establishing those relationships and building the relationships. And so it means trying to go to as many events in the town as possible. Planning board meetings, town meeting last week was one of the largest town meetings I've ever seen, was the one they had in Hanover, because they had an override and MBTA Communities Act. And then last night it was at a Chamber of Commerce event over at the YMCA in Hanover, and I got to see the town manager there. the fire chief, member of the police department, you reached out and we started chatting about grants that the police department's interested in applying for. And so just being out and around and building those relationships, and it holds true too. I don't have a dog, but walking, in the supermarket or being out. Today I grabbed a sandwich at lunch, and my dentist from when I was a kid was there, and he wanted to talk politics. And a former member of the school committee was across from him saying, "Hey, John's getting a sandwich, let him go." But we probably talked for about 20 minutes. I was at the Multicultural Festival up at Pageant Field in Quincy over the weekend, and a guy came over and chatted, and I could see my wife like, "Okay, we got to get going." But
does she have a code word like my husband?
So when we were out, if I don't know somebody's name, and I am terrible at names, absolutely terrible. It just goes like this. So what we worked out is if I don't introduce the person, then Jean knows I don't know the person's name, and she'll say, "Hi, I'm Jean." And usually that works. Occasionally, Jean will say, "Hi, I'm Jean," and the person will say, "Oh, hi."
Nice to meet you.
It didn't work. So you kind of do all those types of things. But getting out and about is really the best way to meet people and build the relationships.
And I'm a talker. I don't know if you'd notice, but my husband always says, "Okay, you say a half an hour, we're going to be there for an hour and a half." So Catherine is in the back. There's been plenty of times where I'm doing something and I have to be somewhere else, and she'll yell out at me that there's turkeys, because that will get my attention and be like, because I have a hard time with parting from one event to get to another one, even though I know that I need to be at another event. So I think COVID was a blessing in disguise, where you could be at two places at once. Yeah. You could be on one screen on Teams and another screen on Zoom, and you're able to be at two places. But unfortunately, we haven't mastered that in real life. But
as a department head at the department head level, I will say that knowing both of you and being able to see both of you at different events. I saw you at a legislative breakfast recently. I saw you at the Rotary Club's, the Braintree Rotary Club celebration of the 80th anniversary of the founding of the Abington Rotary Club.
That was a mouthful.
It's a mouthful, but it's quite an event.
I think that was the first time I left my daughter, too.
Yes, I remember.
Oh, was it really?
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. It's always nice to be able to see you, and looping back to COVID. You and I worked the recovery area together after vaccine clinics in the spring of 2021, when it was not fun.
Yep.
But it was nice it's nice as a department head, it's nice to know, because part of my job is political. It's to advocate for library services for all of you. And it's nice to know that you can, advocacy goes beyond the town. Federal grant administered by the state, letters from your state rep and state senator to support that grant. And that was, library grants are not like police or school grants. We're not talking a lot of money, but $15,000 is a lot of money for a library budget. That's a decent amount of money. And knowing who I was asking for those letters, and that you knew me and were familiar with the library, you were able to write. I quoted both of your letters of support at the beginning. You actually wrote almost the same sentence, just with different words. It was wonderful. But that being able to do that give and take is wonderful. So thank you for that.
And you do an excellent job at advocating for the library here in Abington and libraries across the Commonwealth. I think we definitely are lucky to have you here.
Thank you. We are lucky to have you.
Thank you.
Well, let me see. So the sort of my last question, and then we're going to open it to questions from the crowd. What is your, what's a hope or an aspiration you have going forward in the next couple of years? I know you're working on legislation together. Anything else?
My hope is to get that done real quick.
Sure.
Probably the quickest conference committee there is.
That's the goal.
That's the fingers crossed. My hope is to really change some narratives. I'm a new mom. I'm a working mom. I trying to balance the life of new mom and working has been great and fulfilling in and of itself. But as I went back to the domestic violence stuff, my hope is that we are able to continue to move forward around that, to change the narrative of why didn't you leave, instead of how do we help you get to safety? How do we help you and your family making sure that you're safe and that you're no longer at risk? Being a survivor, so many times I can tell you I left my abuser, but so many times I also had people come up to me and be like, well, why didn't you leave? And it's like, well, let's have that conversation, because I think having that perspective and being able to understand that it's not just a choice to stay or a choice to leave, that there is a very much convoluted situation going on, and that there's real love from some people in that relationship. So really changing how the House, I know the Senate's a little bit more progressive on this, which I'm very happy of. You know, they were able to get it through the Senate side last session, but unfortunately the House killed it right at the very end. So my hope is to, at the very least, get something, little crumble of something, just to make sure that we're moving forward on not saying that it's all about the criminals and their rights and their resources, that we actually need to be thinking about the victims and their rights and their resources. So that's my hope and my aspiration, and hopefully we'll get it done.
Mine, I shared the same thing, hopes legislatively that we will get through this conference committee very quickly. I'm confident we will. And then I have policy areas that I work in, and I'm hopeful that we're able to kind of move the needle on some of those. One, we've been very active lately in sports betting. And I was just at a conference all day yesterday, and I'll be at another one tomorrow. And to see the data, to see the numbers about what's happening with sports betting, and how the industry is just making so much money so quickly and is looking right now to move beyond sports betting into online gambling. And what we're learning is that they target a certain group, the most vulnerable, and then they make the most money off of that most vulnerable group. And in some ways that's not unique to betting. It was the same with tobacco and other issues. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to have an impact on the sports betting issue and the gambling issue overall. And I always take the position, I guess I don't care if somebody wants to place a bet or do this or that. What really bothers me is when it's a big industry targeting vulnerable people, exploiting that targeted group for financial gain. We saw that in the opioid situation, and I see Rick Collins here. Rick was the chief of staff, and when we first went into the legislature, we were able to pass a very comprehensive opioid bill that required physicians to really check their behavior when it came to prescribing. And so I'm hopeful that that progress, or that work, will continue, and that we'll see overdose deaths, which are now turning a little bit, continue to drop, and that we will see improvement not only in overdose death numbers, fewer people dying, but fewer people overdosing, and then fewer people beginning drug use. And so that's a hope as well. Continue to work on tobacco. And then, and we share this, I know, as parents, you always think about your children and what the world's going to be for them. And I will tell you, up until the last several years, I never, ever had a thought that the world would not be as good a place for them as it was for me. I consider myself the ultimate optimist, and I believe that every day when you look at the world and see something really good happening in this corner of the world, something really good happening over there, something not so good happening here, that at the end of the day, when you balanced it out, the world was a better place and moved forward. And as much of an optimist, I find that somewhat challenging now. And so my hope is that when I'm done with this, that the world will be a better place, not only just for my children, but for all children. And as much as I feel that there's a challenge to that belief and that goal right now, I still am very optimistic. And I touched on the kids in Holbrook, and we see it here with the kids in Abington. If we can get to them, we will be in really good hands. My worry is, what do we give to them? And so my hope is that we give to them what I was able to enjoy, a sense that I and my brothers and sisters and people of my generation were going to be in a better situation than my parents. They gave that to us. And my hope is that we're able to give it to all our children.
It's a big hope.
It is, but I'm optimistic. I'm hopeful.
It's a big hope. Are you two ready for some questions? Okay, because this is being recorded, I'm going to restate your question because I have the microphone and I didn't want to wander around with one. So if you have a question, please ask and then I'll restate it for them. I'll restate it. Anybody? There has to be a question. Yes, Mr. Collins.
You brought up a while ago the MBTA Communities Act. Abington is was one of the first towns to approve their zoning district, and I think right now towns are approving it on about a 5-to-1 basis. I think about 62 have approved, about 12 are rejected. Is there any talk at the State House level about increasing the number of carrots to entice more communities to pass this? There's a lot of sticks that they're being wielded right now, but there aren't a lot of carrots in terms of enhanced grant opportunities, infrastructure funding, anything else that will help make communities say, oh, maybe this is a really good idea, maybe we should consider this again. Has there been any sort of conversation about that?
So the question was, has there been any conversation about increasing incentives for communities to adopt the MBTA Communities Act as opposed to the penalties that are currently being enacted? And I believe the data you said was it's about a 5-to-1 ratio for communities that are adopting the MBTA Communities Act. And for the record, Abington did adopt it. Is that a good summary? Okay.
So I can't say that I've heard whether or not there is or there isn't. I'm not 100% sure. I can definitely probably ask around a little bit more on that to see if there's any talk from the sense of the minority party to really move the incentive a little bit more. Obviously, you're part of the majority party now, the administration. I don't know if you've heard anything as far as the administration and or the majority party goes, but I personally haven't heard anything. But I wouldn't say it's not happening. I just don't know if it is.
No, I agree with the assessment. I don't think, well, at least my sense is there's no formal discussions on it. There hasn't been any public discussions about maybe we should provide more incentive and less of a hammer or a stick. But I'm getting the sense from being at the Hanover Town meeting last week, the Rockland Town meeting, hearing from people that are calling in, that it might be something, it should be something to consider. We have tried to address infrastructure concerns, water and sewer, and whether they will be met through the state. There is a housing infrastructure fund that's being established. How much funding ends up in there still remains to be seen. But I think that's a recognition that, hey, we're going to have to help communities with water and sewer if we expect them to build housing. We just can't say build it, zone for it, expect the developers come in, and you're all on your own. So I think there's a growing sense. I know I spent today looking over the 1,000+ amendments that were filed to the Senate budget, and there's a couple in there that address the MBTA Communities Act with the idea that perhaps it should be a little bit different of approach. Another year, for instance, to give towns the opportunity to do better planning. But I think as a result of some of the more publicized cases in Milton, Marshfield, that there's still belief we have to do this because we are desperate for housing, but that there should be more of a reward for communities for doing it as opposed to just saying to them, do it. Mm-hmm. It should be, hey, let's work together. Mm-hmm. We want you to zone for this number of housing, not build for it, but zone for it, and recognizing that some housing will be built, that we're willing to work with you and have to work with you on the infrastructure issues, water, sewer, and then the concerns about schools are real as well. And there's a bunch of amendments in the Senate budget to increase the per pupil amount that the state pays to schools, kind of in recognition of that. So we'll see where it all shakes out.
Thank you. Yes.
So as I was a stay-at-home mom at one point, and then a working mom, and then now everything mom, the concern with federal grants and other things are starting to go away for a lot of childcare providers. Childcare is incredibly hard to just get. You basically have to get a spot before you even are trying to have a child now in Massachusetts. For some, it's a second mortgage, third mortgage. Is there anything going on to help that in Massachusetts for the working families that need that support?
So Oh, sorry, go ahead. Nope, I know, I keep forgetting you have to repeat.
The question is about childcare and about how a lot of federal money for that supported childcare is going away, and what's happening at the state level to provide support for families who need childcare, because I think everyone knows childcare is incredibly difficult to find and incredibly expensive. Did that summarize well?
Yeah, and the staff doesn't get paid well either. That's a whole other subject, but.
I mean, I can definitely understand that, especially now having a 9-month-old and looking into that. I'm finding I'm kind of behind the ball on it. Like you said, it's like almost finding a pediatrician. You got to get one before they're even born, and they don't even accept before they're born, and then you don't even know if you're going to have one by the time they're born. So I can understand that. I know the House is very much actively looking at childcare and how do we make it more accessible and affordable to working families, and what does that look like? You know, obviously this is, I think, a more lengthier conversation because, like you said, it's not just the family that's paying for the child care, but then also the workers that are working in the child care facilities, and they might have children that are in the child care system too. So it's not an easy fix, even though like you and I may say, okay, here's the easy fix. I think there's very much a lot of layers that go to that. But I do know the House side, and I'm assuming the Senate side as well, is looking into that and how do we make it, one, more affordable, and two, more accessible, because we need to incentivize those workers and good workers, right? We just don't want anyone taking care of our children. I think putting our child into childcare, we're very much entrusting those individuals to love them and treat them like their own. And you hear those horrible stories where, I mean, I'm very much in fear of leaving my child with anyone I don't know, because you hear those horrible stories of children getting exposed to fentanyl, like, which is, you think, what? How does that even happen, right? You're leaving your child with someone that you think you can trust, and then your child's in the hospital, or your child is, unfortunately, has passed because of neglect. So I think incentivizing it, but then it's like the other side is like the nursing homes, right? Our seniors and our elderlies. It's a full circle, and we really need to address it. I just think, unfortunately, that's going to take a little bit more time than you and I both would like. But it is definitely something that's on kind of all the minds of especially because there's more women in the legislature. No offense to men, but working moms is a lot different than working dads. And I'm starting to realize that, being a working mom, and I love my husband. He is a great dad, but he's able to go to work and mom has it. And so it sounds like you're in the same boat where you say, do it all, mom. So hats off to you. Happy Mother's Day. But I think it's definitely something that's being looked at.
One of the problems we face, and you mentioned with seniors care, child care slots, we're finding it in nursing homes, we're finding it in substance use recovery programs, we're finding it in behavioral health, mental health facilities. And what it is an inability to provide the workforce so that they can provide the services. And it's kind of it's a circular thing, because some people stay home because the cost of childcare is so expensive, so they're not in the workforce. And so there's this big circle of how do we find enough workers. So we have in the substance use area, mental health area, nursing homes, and early education, we have a great number of slots that are licensed. And the YMCA is an example. They will tell you that they're licensed for a certain number of daycare slots, and they can't fill the seats because they don't have the staff to do the work. And so oftentimes they're empty classrooms. They have the facility, they just don't have enough workers to be in the classroom so that then those seats can be filled. So, and that's the same in mental health facilities, inpatient facility. The programs, the facilities are licensed for this number of beds, and they can only fill this number because of staffing issues. Mm-hmm. And so what we've tried to do is, through rate adjustments, increase rates that we pay to child care providers, and hope that that will entice people that are coming out of college to stay in the profession or to go into college to get their licenses to then teach. But when we do that for child care, are we taking somebody away from that may be working for senior services to provide care to seniors? And if we are successful then of attracting people to do that, we taking people away that might provide mental health care. generationally or demographically, it's a much smaller population than the baby boomers. And so we face those real workforce challenges. And that's just, it's multi-layered. That's just one of the issues that we're facing. And I don't know the answer to it. We provide more funding for the programs to attract people to them so that we can then fill the seats and fill the beds. And it's just this big circle right now where somebody moves here and they're difficult jobs. They are really difficult jobs to be in a classroom with children all day, or to be providing care to a senior, or to be working in a mental health facility. And the pay that we offer is sometimes just competitive or not as competitive at what it takes to go to work for a big superstore or a fast food place where they've increased their rates. And that's a challenge. So you can go to a job like that, you can check in, do your work, and go home. Or, for X amount of dollars, and for that same X amount of dollars, you can go in and have a much more difficult job. And then it's also the remote aspect of it. The jobs that we're talking about are show-up jobs, care for children, care for seniors, care for people with mental health issues. They're show-up jobs, and those jobs are competing with jobs that people can work remotely.
Yep.
And so those are some of the challenges that we're facing.
Thank you. Yes.
I heard, this was 2 or 3 weeks ago, that there was a bill to give homeless veterans preference over migrants, and it failed. What's the rationale behind that?
So that was an amendment to our House budget debate. I voted in favor of that amendment. I actually voted down the budget. It was my first year voting no on the overall budget. I felt like we took care of too many people and not taking care of our own out of that budget, especially when we have so many families reaching out because they're struggling to pay their taxes, they're struggling to pay their mortgage, they're struggling to pay their food bill, their light bill. I mean, the amount of people, it breaks my heart. I wish I was a billionaire and I could just give everyone money when it came to some of the stories I've heard. The rationale in the sense of the conversations I had with some of the House majority members was that, and it was said also on the House floor, that there is a veterans bill that's supposed to be coming out this session that should be addressing certain issues around homelessness and other aspects of our veteran community. Again, that's what I'm being told. I don't know for sure if that's something that will happen and come to fruition, but I was very disappointed in a lot of my colleagues for voting that amendment down. But sometimes they vote with leadership and sometimes they don't. But I'm sorry that it didn't pass. I was hopeful that it would, but unfortunately it didn't.
And from the Senate's perspective, from at least my perspective in the Senate, we sometimes have these amendments that are there and they look, pretty obvious. We should be giving veterans preference. We had one, and I think it was on the supplemental bill that we voted relative to the migrant situation where, we should give preference to residents. Seems pretty common sense. But when you peel them back, it's been declared unconstitutional, for instance, in some cases, to give a preference to somebody based on how long they have lived somewhere. Because we have to remember that the EA system, the emergency assistance program that we have, the housing program that we use to house migrants, that's just not migrants. Half the people that are in that program are people who are residents of Massachusetts who have experienced domestic violence issues, and they are in the housing as well. They represent about half the population there. And in terms of the veterans specifically, we have in Massachusetts, I think unquestioned, the best veterans programs in the country. We provide veteran service offices, agents in pretty much every community, or they collaborate and cover multiple communities. And if a veteran walks through the door, it is a priority for that veteran service agent to find housing, food, whatever it may be that the veteran needs. And some of the programs that we have, are the best in the country. And we do have a bill coming up, and I'm hopeful, as you are, that we will pass the HERO Act, which adds on to what we are doing. And in terms of housing for veterans, we do build veterans housing. We are just spending millions and millions of dollars out at the soldiers' homes, building state-of-the-art, multi-million dollar facilities that will be literally the best in the country. And then the final point is I find that it's, well, we can do this, but not that. Or we're doing this, why aren't we doing that? Whether it's veterans or you name the issue. We have the ability to do both. We can provide for people who are vulnerable no matter what their circumstances are or how they're in their circumstances. And that's not to say that we should just have an open spending policy relative to migrants. It's not sustainable. And I think there's kind of a universal sense in the legislature now that we can't sustain this. And so we're pushing, and we'll be pushing through the budget to make sure that there's accountability measures in place, making sure that the money's wisely spent. And in the Senate, we had a proposal that the spending would ramp down with time to send a message to the governor that this isn't sustainable and you've got to find efficiencies. So a lot of different things going on. But I feel comfortable in saying that if a veteran in Massachusetts is in need of services, services are available. They are not getting services as a result of something else that we're doing for somebody else. The services are there. Are they perfect? No. Do sometimes people slip through the cracks? Yes. But when they raise their hand and ask for assistance, we do a better job in Massachusetts than anywhere else in the country.
Thank you.
I would have to agree with you on that.
Anybody else? Going once? No more questions? Okay. I want to thank you both very much for coming, for giving of your time, for not spending the evening with your family, for trekking out from Boston very quickly, and also for supporting our grant, because opportunities like this to meet with you and to talk to you were central to what we were hoping to accomplish this year with this grant. And I am thrilled that you were both able to be here, and I want to thank Catherine as well for her time. And also, I want to thank all of you. I always worry when we do programs, especially something like this that's different for the library. I don't worry about book clubs. People come to them. When we do something like this that's different, I'm always worried. And in fact, I said in my email to the senator and the state rep, I don't know how many people we'll get. There's a possibility that we could get nobody. But then you're worried that you're going to wait. I know it's like, I'm going to waste their time. I'm so upset. So thank you, all of you, for coming this evening. Your time is very much appreciated. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.